welcome back to MUP Pannilore. So I'm doing this by myself, so I do apologize for any awkwardness or any stumbling along when I do these interviews. I'm always got Mark with me, and that's why he always hosts the show, because I can barely speak. But today we got an interview with Clint Werner. Is it Werner, or hopefully I'm pronouncing that right?
Werner, yeah, you got
Werner.
it.
There we go. And he is the writer of a lot of the Xirkaali new lore. He's also the writer of Rise of the Celestians, and he also did the 2024 Clash of Kings, mainly the background stuff of that, and we'll get into that a bit later. So hi, Clint. How's, I guess, your morning? It's about 11 o'clock over there, isn't it?
A little bit after 10 right now.
A little bit after 10. So for me, it's 6 a.m. I think this is one of the rare cases that it's actually morning for two time zones just on different days. It's a very strange experience sometimes. Okay. Ultimately, we're going to dive into the new Xirkaali lore the best we can. Now, obviously, we're going to rip the band-aid off right now. This is going to be a spoiler-free podcast. Clint has offered to come on later on to talk more into the spoilers once we've actually got our hands on the book. But keep in mind, we're going to stay very much away from a lot of that spoiler stuff. It's up to Clint to disclose anything he wants to disclose if he wants Mantic snipers on him. But ultimately, we will play it as safe as we can. But there could be a lot of stuff in here that will be either vaguely hinted at, or it won't make sense until after you read the book. So just keep that in mind going into this. We'll do the best we can to make this as interesting as possible, because there's a few interesting things to talk about. Was that safe enough of a disclosure there, Clint?
I think so.
Think so. All right, perfect. All right, so unfortunately, we did have Clint on camera before for those that are watching on YouTube. However, it kept on freezing the minute we push record, so we've just turned that off for now, and I'll pop up a few images as we go through it. But we'll put the mic over to Clint. So, Clint, you might as well, for those that have only ever heard about you from the Mantic side of things, what have you done for other franchises, I guess, and what's your history? Give yourself some credit.
Well, I'm probably best known for a lot of the work I've done with Warhammer over the years. Wrote extensively for Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Think I have about 24 novels between Warhammer Fantasy, Age of Sigmar, and a couple for Warhammer 40k. I've also written a trilogy of novels set in the Zombicide Black Plague universe, and a pair of novels for Marvel's Legends of Asgard.
Ooh, that's a lot. I mean, what's the difference? Well, like, from your experience, have you found working with all those different franchises like difficult, or have they all been pretty smooth sailing?
Yeah, really, each IP kind of brings its own sort of restraints and conditions along with it. Some of them give you a little bit more free range than others to sort of go down the rabbit hole in different directions. I'd probably say the trickiest thing I ever dealt with an intellectual property would be the early Age of Sigmar material, specifically Wardens of the Everqueen, which was very rigid with the structure to that novel.
Is that a direction that you're given, or just because of the nature of the universe at the time?
No, that was really kind of dictated by the game studio. They essentially wanted no deviation from anything that was in the army book.
And when you get approached with that kind of direction, from a writer point of view, because I can't imagine, how you kind of worm your way around it. I mean, that's part of being a creative, is to kind of fill in the holes when there are some. But how difficult is that for you as a writer? Is it something that you get a bit of writer's block on it, or is it just like another aspect to a book you just weave in?
Well, on that particular one, the most frustrating aspect was that the game book it was tying into was also in development at the same time. So I ended up having to rewrite several chapters because the lore on their end had also changed. So all of
Ooh.
a sudden, hey, by the way, there's a dragon in this part. Well, that just changed that entire incident in the book, you know.
Did you experience that much with developing the Xirkaali?
No, not much at all.
Okay. Different
Probably
experience.
the
Interesting.
biggest thing was sort of changing the overall tone to the Xirkaali Empire from almost like a purely neutral stance to edging them more into good guys, but not on your side, kind of an
Uh,
approach.
Oh, interesting. Oh, well, obviously we'll dive that a bit later, but that's a definitely an interesting aspect to dive into. All right. Well, what we'll do, we'll start at the very beginning. So Clint has been in the Pannilore universe, you could say, for some time. Was the first project you worked on Rise of Celestians, or did you do a little bit of work behind the scenes before that?
Prior to Rise of the Celestians, I did do a short story that was featured in Tales from the Abyss.
That's right, you did. Which one was that? Was it that one about? I want to say salamanders for some reason, on the top of my head.
No, that
Um,
one had the Ammonites, the Empire of Dust, going up against the Trident Kings.
That's right. It was a navy kind of battle. Yes. Man, I completely forgot you wrote that one because I damn catalog everything. You would think out of everyone that would know, I would remember on that one. Anyway, so how did you really get involved, I guess, with that short story? With someone of your color? Yeah, there we go. The seas does not give up her dead. That was the short story that you wrote. I guess, how did you get involved with that? So this is back in, I think, 2018 is when you first, that book came out. So it might have been a little bit before, but
Yeah, I
I guess,
think
how
it
did
was
you get involved?
2016 that I did that one.
Oh,
And
okay.
then
You might have written it there, and then the book
take a
came out
while
2018.
from writing to the publication. But
Yeah, exactly. So I guess,
mainly I
how
got
did you
into
get
that
roped in?
one from my previous work with Wayne Tussar Productions.
Oh, cool. So they reached out to you rather than you kind of saying, putting your hand up and say, "Hey, I want to write for this world."
Right. I mean, I'd already known of Pannilore, you know, and sort of on the periphery. I had a friend that had the Dungeon Saga game, so we had dabbled a little bit with the lore before getting the writing project.
Actually, the one question I forgot to ask you: what is your experience with tabletop gaming? Are you just purely from like me? Because I mean, I don't go to tournaments. I don't play competitively. I'm more definitely into the lore, painting my armies to match kind of how the lore feels. Are you much into tabletop, or just more of a case of just love the lore? You love writing about worlds like this?
See, I kind of grew into it from tabletop gaming, Warhammer Fantasy Battles back in the day. I think the last thing I ever had that actually hit the table was Mordheim. But
Oh yeah, that's the game that got me into it. I remember playing
yeah,
that in, I guess American version of middle school, and I remember playing that and competitively, and I still got some of the terrain, some of the cardboard terrain from those days. It's good memories.
the good old Blood on the Streets
Yeah.
expansion.
Oh man, I really they need to bring that back. I think they did bring it back for a brief period, but I don't know. Nothing's really captured that feeling since.
There's something odd with the rights on that one.
Oh,
And
really?
if you stop and think about it, all the specialist games from around that era, they really haven't come back as they were. So instead of
Yeah,
bringing
Blood
back
Bowl, they
Man of
changed a lot,
War,
didn't
they
they?
did the Dread Fleet, which was kind of the same thing but completely different rules.
Hmm.
And you
Yeah,
figure
and they never
Battlefield Gothic never came back. Um,
Epic 40K didn't come back.
yeah, it came back, but it was different, and then it went away
Uh
again.
yeah.
Mighty Empires, I don't think they ever did anything with that again.
Yeah, I don't think they can do that really in modern day. It's bringing a game in and expecting people just to stop playing it, because I mean, you've seen Morheim. I've seen independent people continue Morheim outside of the official developer, and I think it's very important for developers, if you're going to release a game, support it the longest you can in as many ways as you can, even if it's by STLs. And I think Mantic are doing a good job with Armada, continuing to support it that way. So I don't think games can ever really die in the modern world. So to even just stop doing it is a bit foolish. just always recognize that you got the game going.
Well, I think
but yeah,
the game dies anymore is if the fans abandon it. So
yeah,
it's really
I
not
100%.
company.
And we've seen that so many times as well. Anyway, I cut you off there when you talk about Morheim. So that's a good choice of ADHD. Anyway, I'll let you continue your tabletop experience.
Well, from tabletop, probably like the last 6-7 years, it's just been strictly board games.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Any particular board games?
And take less time to set up and play.
Yeah, I think when you get older, you like simplicity, and I think a lot of people put champions, so Kings of War champions into that kind of like simple, quick kind of category. I'm very much like that. I like simple kind of quick games you can play, and especially getting people that are non board game players just into the games as well. It's a lot easier as well. So I completely understand from that angle. Cool. All right. Well, we'll dive back into it. So, yeah, how did Rise of Celestians come about then?
That was actually proposed to me by Matt Gilbert over at Mantic. They wanted to do some background books about, essentially the fall of the gods. So we had to sort of start right when they enter Pannilore from, the nebulous world that they originally inhabited. And I've got the second book, which is going to be Fall of the Celestians, the Pannilore Mirror. That is all set. I just am doing kind of extensive edits on it right now.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Fall of Celestians. I think the events of the Celestians coming, the smashing of the mirror, which split the Celestians into the Shining and Wicked Ones, and then the God War that came after, are such important events. I mean, the God War created so many races that we know that's very unique to Pannilore, like all the herd races, all the race, not all the races of the Trident Realm, the majority of the races of the Trident Realm, like the Naiads. We've got the Orcs, the Goblins. We've got all sub races as well. There's so many things that came out of the God War that the four Celestians has to happen first. That splitting of the Celestians need to come first, and I'm actually really looking forward to diving into the nitty gritty of that particular period, because we know of it, and you did a really good job, and that actually leads into the Clash of Kings 2024, because the smashing the mirror, all these concepts were already established, obviously, before you popped along. And the story definitely, because it was kind of reconned. The mirror, the smashing the mirror was kind of reconned in terms of how it actually took place. Because initially, the story just looked like, or it just read like, a guy who didn't get the girl, who got really upset and made a mirror to try and manipulate her into marrying him. But you kind of wrote it to be a more of, he got manipulated by a god who was Osgin, who was trying to get his power back, to get that reputation back from whatever his name is, Melakor. That's it, the leader of the Celestians. So actually going into that, it's a nice little segue. How did you approach with taking an event that had already been established and essentially reworking it into something that's, I would say, a lot better, and also it's a lot less creepier as well?
Well, I think one of the big things is you almost had a schism with how Calusor Pannilore was being presented. Because on the one hand, he's the wisest, most powerful elven mage pretty much ever. And on the other hand, you have him kind of emotionally naive and sort of obsessed. It was kind of an important thing to sort of explain how he gets to that stage. Yeah. And also how he's being manipulated to become that.
And you
One of
definitely see the
Austin's
seeds being laid in Rise of the Celestians as well, of Oscan and of Calusor, of him being this young mage and kind of, and then Oscan has that issue in Rise. I'm not going to spoil too much, but that issue in Rise, which kind of starts to lay the seeds to what is seen in this bit, and I think it flows very, very well.
Well, and two, an important thing to bear in mind is one of Oskin's main titles is the Father of Lies.
Yeah.
And in Fall of the Celestians, you really see how he earned that title repeatedly.
That's interesting. So, because I always assumed he was called the Father of Lies after he became a Wicked One, and it was something that he title he kind of earned. But are you saying that he basically that kind of reputation happened before the Mirror?
Well, it's interesting. They have the Clash of Kings bringing up the Twilight King background because King Urinethar of the Elves is kind of referred to as the twice dead king, because to whip up the elves to properly fight against Korgan in the first book, King Urinethar is claimed to be dead, and it turns out
he dies.
That was a lie from Oscan. Deliberate propaganda to get the elves whipped up so they would fight Korgan and his followers.
Interesting, because that was a question I even asked you, and it was, I think I also asked Matt, is that didn't make sense, because like I read Rise, and it clearly states he dies, and then you read this the 2024 Clash of Kings, and he's alive again, and I was like, I thought it was an error. I thought it was one of those slip ups that leak through in the writing process, especially when you got many different voices writing lore. You know, that kind of stuff happens, but knowing that's actually deliberate and that there's explanation for it that's actually really cool. I really like that. I don't think that's actually been revealed anywhere, so hopefully you don't get a slap on the wrist for that one, but I really like that. It's great.
Well, it was an error because I took too long in the writing of Fall of Celestial.
Well, don't admit it, Clint. Don't admit it. You could own that one. Just own that one.
Gotta admit that one, because that was supposed to come out before Clash of Kings.
Okay, that makes sense. I like it though. I mean, I think one of the things that you know, I love lore, and I do write a little bit on the side, and and part of a little bit of a writing exercise I always have is take a plot hole and explain it. And I'll always find it really cool how some writers explain plot holes that have accidentally been made and make it work. Sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes you get a Rogue One where they explained why there was a hole in the Death Star that could blow it up really, really easily. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I like the way that kind of gets weaved in, and yeah,
I think Robot Chicken explained that one best. With the Death Star's architect is like, I got it down to just one exhaust port.
Yeah. I think there's a Family Guy joke about it. It's like, oh, well, there's just an aesthetic choice by the architect to put a little hole in there. It's like, wait, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, well, we have to think about resale value. It's like, what do you mean resale value? It's a Death Star. I don't know. I like when plot holes, really, really like obvious plot holes, are explained. And it doesn't always need to make sense, but with fantasy, that's part of the joy. Sometimes you can really play with explanations, and sometimes, some things, sometimes the most ridiculous explanations are sometimes the best. So I'm gonna let you own it though, and say that was a deliberate mistake though.
Well, the mistake was I took too long to write, so the book that should have come out before Clash of Kings didn't make it in time.
Yeah, it works there. So yeah, sorry, I cut you off when I went to my ADHD rant there. So yeah, you're saying he's the twice dead king, or twice killed king?
Twice dead. First time with the lie from Oscan, second time the Twilight King.
So that was an Oscan lie. Okay. And then so that's how he got the reputation. And obviously when the mirror split and he I can't. I'm not sure because previously it was noted that he absorbed the Shining. Oh no, the Shining One died inside the mirror, and then I think in the 2024, I might get this wrong. He absorbs his Shining One. Is that right?
In the 2024, I believe they mentioned that. But again,
Yeah.
you gotta wonder who's telling you that particular story.
True, because there's only two people there, wasn't there? There was Ozkin and there was Kalasor.
Well, Calisor's already gone when the mirror shatters.
Was it? Yeah, I guess. Wasn't he with her while she was looking into the mirror, though? I interpreted that.
Because he ignores the warning to get her to look away when the bird sings.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Fantasy is all about interpretation, isn't it? Sometimes. But yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, I guess that's where the Lord of Lies comes from, and that kind of like set the tone for what's going forward. So before we dive into the Xirkaali, I guess there are some seeds laid with the Xirkaali in this particular the background side of things. So I guess how much at this point when you're helping write this lore, how much into the Xirkaali lore had you gone? Is it was more dabbled on? You know, where were you at this time?
Well, actually, right after the Twilight Kin, I was writing background for another faction, which we can't talk about. And then
okay,
immediately after that, we got into the Xirkaali lore. So Clash of Kings, I think we were working on that in 2023, late 2022. So it was right immediately after finishing the Twilight Kin and this other faction that I started working on the Xirkaali background.
Interesting. So there are some hints in Clash of Kings 2024 about the Xirkaali, and I think it makes a point that Twilight can set up diplomatic ties with them. Was that something that you kind of wanted to hint at, or was that something that like, hey, we need to put in somewhere here? Because several supplements before that, Xirkaali had come up. We had some Armada supplements that was mentioned in. It had always been a little bit of sprinkled in there, here or there. So was that something that you deliberately did, or was that something that Mantic asked you to kind of sprinkle in?
Once we knew we were going to be working on them further on, I thought it was a good idea to get those hints in there. And I can't remember if Matt first suggested it or I suggested it back to Matt Gilbert. But either way, it was sort of a mutually, hey, yeah, this is a good thing to work in here.
So it sounds like it's been planned for a while. So I guess winding back a bit, we'll start with Rise of Celestians. There are two particular things in Rise of Celestians that seem to will play a big part in Xirkaali lore once we get our hands on it. And we know this already based off the lore article that Mantic posted. And that's the Celestian twins, which names aren't mentioned in Rise of Celestians, but we do find out about the names. And the Uranus, the snake kind of seems to be ancient creatures. You could even put them in lines of they were just like the humans and dwarfs, and they were around before the Celestians actually arrived. Those two aspects seem to have played a big part in Xirkaali lore. So what did you know about that when you wrote Rise of Celestians, or was that those just you just left them there as dangling threads, and this just kind of matched that kind of idea when Xirkaali was starting to be fleshed out?
The Uraeus were kind of developed independent of the Xirkaali. Again, like I was saying, we have another faction that was worked on between the Twilight Kin and the Xirkaali. But the mention of the twins was a deliberate reference to the Xirkaali. So the Arlon Indra were added into that particular scene as a deliberate Easter egg for the Xirkaali.
So you knew about the Xirkaali when you were writing Rise of Celestians, what, 2022, 23?
When it came up in the edits, That's when the twins were introduced.
Ah, so it wasn't originally planned, and because I think they arrived in the second wave
Yes.
of them. So they went the first batch of 20. They were part of the second batch of 20 that arrived 100 years after the first, with Chiron and Katrina and all that. Karina. Is it Karina? I always say Katrina, and I think it's just because it looks that way in my brain. Katrina. There's no T in it. I don't know why I say it. Katrina, Karina, and Chiron. And so the twins, and this, you gave me this information, but I tentatively put a little asterisk on it in the wiki until the confirmation finally came out of their names, which is Arlen and Indra, which you told me I think we did the countercharge podcast. We talked about it, but I didn't put it in until, because I'm a much believer of, with the wiki, it should be something people will be able to reproduce again if they needed to. So it's not lore until it's written down. So it looks like that stayed true. What was that?
I was just saying that's a good way to approach it too.
Yeah, I always it's like science.
Yeah, lore changes.
Yeah, lore changes, and that especially with a franchise lore, things are always in flux and always expected to be in flux. It's the only way you can really develop a franchise. So I always say, it's just like science. You should be able to replicate it, and that's why you should always note the mistakes if things get reconned. Because if you don't, someone's going to turn around and go, wait, wasn't this the case? And then always point it out. But if you completely erase that mention from the wiki, no one's going to recognize, it was reconned. And it's always good to note that kind of stuff down, because things change and more. And I think it's also a nice way with fantasy of getting around those recons is it comes down to a reliable narrator. And so, like, if you're reading Rise of Celestians, for instance, that king being dead, the narrator wasn't reliable. But if we from people just reading the book and writing a wiki, for instance, we don't know any better. So it's one of those kind of little things as you can get around lore kind of issues with that, depending on the narrator of the particular piece you're reading. So I guess, with the twins introduced, how did you, I guess, approach them? Did you approach them any differently? Did you have any massive plans for them when you started thinking about their influence on Pannilore?
Not so much in Rise of the Celestians, but I did give them quite a bit of time in Fall of the Celestians. So we're kind of working towards where they're going to be involved with the Xirkaali, with the Himesians.
Because based off what the lore says, and I'm really going off what has been posted on the Mantic website at this time, just about the Xirkaali, it kind of implies the Xirkaali, or I wouldn't say that the Xirkaali, because the Xirkaali Empire was founded. So I guess is it Himelions?
Himesians. Kind of a better term for cynocephali, which were the dog-headed men in medieval lore.
I think it's easier for me to say doggos. So it's gonna be a lot less painful for everyone if I say doggos. So the doggos seem to have been created before the Celestians arrived. That was right to say, right?
Yeah, they're.
That's what the lore said in the article.
Before the founding of Ophidia, as we understand it.
Now, did you have any piece in that the particular race itself, or was that something that you were given?
Interestingly, the original plans for them were a bit different, and as we sort of shifted them from being like a neutral faction to more of a good from another angle kind of an alignment, they really changed from the original concept, which was much more violent, animalistic kind of a people. So
I guess the better way to approach this particular topic, because there's only so much we can talk about. Obviously, we have to be spoiler free. We only can touch on what's been already posted publicly on the Mantic website. So I don't know if you've read that yourself, Clint, or given it a bit of a read through. But I'll let you know if it's been mentioned there or not. Just so, oh no, you actually wrote the article itself, but you would have excluded, in your mind, you would have just done a quick summary, so you might have forgotten what you have excluded or included, because it looks like a lot of this is actually from the actual book itself. But I guess from the original, walk us through from the original concept you were either given or created to what it is now. I mean, yeah, walk us through the timeline of how the Empire kind of changed and evolved, because we also want to, acknowledge that there are different races within the Xirkaali Empire, and the Doggos are just one aspect to the whole empire.
Well, originally, what the territory of the core of the empire was 5 human kingdoms, the Xirkaali kings, and they kind of were almost a fractious, infighting kind of a system of kingdoms, but they would always unite against an external threat. So for a while there, your Doggos are the external threat. Until
and then they kind of reversed it, because it also notes that they kind of learned off them as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Doggos.
And especially the Xirkaali have steel, which the Doggos never figured out how to make for themselves.
So I don't know how to make steel either.
I know it involves iron and coal.
Yeah, I know it involves some kind of raw material. Yeah. So that I guess the steel was the big one, and essentially they just learned off them, and then eventually just did what any great enemy does, and learn off your enemy until you can conquer them.
Yeah, precisely. And the Yan Kings were such sort of exploitative SOBs that the common people were actually better off under the Doggos than they were under their own kings.
Which, I mean, that would make a little bit sense, because you did model them as a more democratic society, the Doggos. Was that something that you guys discussed? Because it doesn't mention if they kept that kind of society structure in the Xirkaali Empire, but it did note that there is seemed like a king. I think what's the Doggos king's title? My mind. What was that? Sorry.
The Cotton.
Yeah, that's it. The Cotton. Yeah.
Essentially, the female version of a Khan.
Ah, okay. I guess that's actually a good segue to go into the influence of the Xirkaali. I mean, it looks like it's more like a Mongolian influence, and I guess was that something that you kind of modeled it, or was that more of a directive from Mantic? I guess, how did that come about?
Actually, they're kind of if you want to look at it this way, their culture is almost a hodgepodge of ancient Greek and sort of Middle Ages Mongolian. So there's aspects of both sort of woven into the fabric of the Hemisions, plus the whole fact of, they're essentially canines, so they have a lot of the biological impulses and instincts of canines woven in there as well. So you have the pack dynamics, you have the kind of might makes right hierarchy within the packs.
Interesting. And I guess how much I guess influence did you take much influence from not modern culture, but I mean, yes, the real life? I mean, how much of that do you deliberately try and stay away from that, or more of a case of like, I guess what's your personal rule about taking aspects from real life and incorporating it into a fantasy culture?
I think you look at what will serve the needs of the story, or in this case, the needs of creating the faction, what'll work best, and if it makes internal sense within the overall framework. So again, with canines, so everything has to kind of come from that framework of dog instincts, wolf pack dynamics, that sort of framework.
Interesting. I'm processing in my brain. So with that, I guess we'll dive it, or we'll mention as well. What about the other races? So you got the Shaolin, and
Yeah,
also the Yarn.
men are the
Yeah,
human inhabitants,
yeah. You also got that ape kind of
the
race as well.
Shapon.
Yes. Is there actually? I guess I don't know whether you can mention this or not, but I guess a yes or no answer is not going to be too spoilery. Are there more races outside of those three?
Well, you have some that are within the empire, other ones that are more or less exterior vassals. For example, there might be a little bit of a spoiler if I do this one, but there are essentially just a name in the background. But you do have Eastern dwarves that are
Eastern
sort of on
dwarves.
the edge of the Xirkaali Empires that are more like a vassal state under their protection.
And are they like? Would you call them just dwarves, just like kind of like free dwarves in the sense of like they're just they're got their own culture, they've got their own thing, but they don't look too much different? Or would you consider them as their own kind of offshoot to dwarves?
I would probably consider them an offshoot. Certainly, they don't have any contact with the dwarves as we know them in Mantica.
Mm.
So they've been distant for long enough. I mean, they might be like a rumor of, hey, these guys went off this way and we never heard from them again.
Yeah, I mean the dwarfs were one of those noble races that were around well before the Celestians were, and we know there's other small races around like the Murlocs and other races like that. So it doesn't surprise me. I consider them very much like the Yarn. That you're going to have a lot of these noble races spread throughout Pannilore, and we only know really the upper half of Pannilore at the moment. That we've only really explored it, and we don't actually know how big the world in total is. I mean, we could be just seeing we always compare it to Earth, right? And I think the Warhammer universe is very much modeled after the Earth kind of aesthetic, but it doesn't necessarily mean Pannilore needs to follow the same suit. It could be just like a Jupiter-sized planet with many different continents on the other side of the planet that we don't know about. And you talk about thousands and thousands of years of these noble races traveling and settling on it. You're going to get these offshoots like the Dwarf. And I would like to see a little bit more offshoots of the noble races. I mean, we've had the human offshoots, so we've got the Yarn, we've got the elves have had so many offshoots that I think they need a break. But I would like jungle elves or jungle dwarfs. I think so that, I mean, being from New Zealand and being a little bit more wild and only having birds around you, I got kaka, which are parrots, coming back into the suburbs and so forth. And I would love to see what a fantasy army looks like with that. I'm trying to sell Mantic on a hobgoblin army, which is a bird influenced army, so they ride birds and giant birds and so forth. I'm trying to get Mantic to do something like that. But yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense to have Eastern dwarfs, and it'll be interesting to see how they integrate in the wider story going forward. And I guess diving into that, how much of the story, of the main narrative of Pannilore were you involved in? Or did you just set the scene of what the Xirkaali are and then just leave it there, or are you helping drive that overall arc of the story?
I would say it's been an even mix. I was the original one that suggested 3 invading forces, and then the studio decided they needed a 4th one, which really added a lot because it was a naval invasion. Instead of taking a direct route, they are coming completely around the southern continent.
Okay, I'm going to pause you right there, Clint, because I don't think that's been revealed.
I thought that they had revealed the clause.
Okay, I'm going to check that. And if I get approval, I will cut that out. If you are listening to this, it means I didn't cut it out, and it was got given the okay. So yeah, so there's essentially four invading forces, which we know there's an invasion. I think we just don't know the scale of the invasion as of yet.
Well, one of the notes is that these are colossal armies that are coming in too, like big as anything seen in the God War.
So yeah, that was mentioned. Yeah,
isn't a minor incursion like another orc outbreak or something. This is a potentially country-ending kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does mention in the narrative that was posted, or the article, that this is the greatest army gathered since the God War. So that, yeah, you definitely established that. And it's something because they got the claw aspect of it. That's actually that actually is a question a lot of people have come, want to know a little bit more about the claws. Is I have interpreted it as like it's just it's kind of like different parts of the empire, the claw, and the northern half is one claw, and so forth. I guess, how much can you disclose about the claws? Is that going to be a significant thing of knowing about each section of the claw, or is the claws just what we're going to call the Xirkaali Empire's army?
Well, they're kind of 4 super armies that they've gathered together. Because their normal breakdown is a horde. These are like super hordes.
Super. Are they got each personalities? Like, are they like one specified in this particular? Like, a good example was the League of Werner. Is that I think that the Targan Spire is more attuned to mammoths having in their army, so that they've got mammoths there, but the ones in Eowulf don't have mammoths because they don't have them. Is it kind of like that, or are they all kind of similar?
Well, probably a good example would be the Phoenix Claw, which is kind of directly poised to gut the elven lands. Because they know that elves have a lot of magic. This thing is very heavy with the witch hunters and the witch cages, and a lot of the Xiryan weapons and armor, which have anti-magic properties. So it's really kind of geared to fight wizards and sorcerers and anybody that's using a lot of magic.
So they're specialized to target them. Interesting. So the claws are more kind of like they've been promised particular lands, and then that's essentially part of the motivation there, why they're essentially hitting the spots that they are.
Well, it's not so much the territory they're occupying as the mission they're sent out to achieve and accomplish. For example, there's another claw that probably won't get too much attention until we eventually get into naval aspects. But they have the tortoise, which is following behind the tiger and the dragon. And they're strictly support. They're building infrastructure, shipyards, bases. So that's kind of the focus for them.
Interesting. And will we find out more about each claw in the book, in the Invasion book? Because that's something that's going to be like you'll find out over the course of the narrative overall.
You'll find out kind of the basics in Invasion, and then I think over the course of 4th edition, you'll find out more about each particular one.
Interesting. Now, I guess, is there an end point to this current story? So it's kind of been hinted at that this narrative is going to last for all of 4th edition, and then eventually lead into 5th edition. So every book that's going to come out, after Invasion, and then I think the last book is called Death. It seems like there's going to be a flowing, continuous story. Are you aware of the end point here, or do you know if the end point has been discussed or anything like that?
It has been discussed, but I wouldn't want to get into any details. Spoilers, or because it might change.
Yeah, and you want that. You want that flexibility to be able to change course, especially if things don't work. If there's a particular thing that just doesn't hit with the story, or if there's a really cool idea that's come up that that Mantic want to pivot to, having that flexibility is important. But it's good. It's also important for people following the story to know that there is definitely a plan.
Oh, there's definitely a plan. Yeah,
there's definitely a plan. There you go. You got that confidence, and I think that goes to my own personal fear of, I'm a huge comic book nerd. I've got I think about 300 Ninja Turtle comic books. I've got heaps of comics of Invincible and for X-Men and a lot of Marvel stuff. And I think following Marvel bothers me because it doesn't feel like there's an overall idea or plan for what they're doing currently in the movies, for instance. It felt like they had that initially when they did Avengers and all that, and it felt like everyone was on the same page, and that's why I think Endgame just was this awesome combination of all that planning. And then after Endgame, it just kind of all fell apart because it didn't feel like there was a concise, vision clear idea of where to go to. And it's just really reassuring after going for third edition, kind of feeling like there wasn't an overall story. It was kind of like just year after year that we're entering in like a new kind of phase of storytelling in Pannilore, that there's this overarching story of the Xirkaali coming, and knowing that there is 5 years of really cool stories. And we just did, and this interview should come out the day after we released the interview with Brandon and Wen Hassar, that the novels as well, that has been integrated into this overall arcing story, with Joshua's novel initially starting with the stand at Callenspire. And I think it's just really exciting to know that you, with your caliber of storytelling, you're fully aware and involved into writing towards that narrative. It's just really, really good, reassuring to hear. All right. So we'll dive into, I guess, one of the questions I personally had is, how much do the model direction, when Mantic are designing their models and so forth, how much does that influence your lore writing? Because I can see them having a particular idea of the type of models they want to create. How is there much collaboration there, or is that just more of a case of you write the lore, throw it out there, and then kind of adapt it to how the aesthetic kind of looks?
I'd say, with the Xirkaali and before them, the Twilight Kin, there was quite a bit of sort of mutual feedback, bouncing ideas. You'd see, the artwork would come back with a completely new look that maybe you weren't expecting, and then you kind of incorporate that in. That's where a lot of the sort of void-touched weapons and armors for the Twilight Kin came from, is seeing the artwork, and it's like, oh, we can do even more with that than just making that, sort of Baroque armor or whatever. We can really go in a crazy direction with this. And the Xirkaali were a little bit of the same. Some of the creatures they came up with, like the Lion Snarl Cavalry, were different from what I pictured, so I just revised some of the lore behind them. And I'd say a lot of those models are just fantastic looking.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest compliment that's come out of the reveal, and I'm hoping someone from Mantic hears this, is the models are definitely the best that they've done so far, and I think also the most unique. I think that's also stuck out as well. It just doesn't feel like it's just another offshoot to something that's been done in the past with a different company. Typically, a lot of people compare it to GW, but there are many other companies out there that it does get compared to. And I think this one really stands out on its own. Obviously, there's always going to be comparisons. You can't be 100% perfect, but it's given a bit of reassurance, because Mantic has come out and said, going forward, whenever we release an army or a book, an army list, we're going to put supporting models with it. And knowing that this is the quality that we're going to get going forward is definitely reassuring, and it's definitely going to help that, especially narrative players, to build their armies and to create the armies that they want, and even closer to lore if they want as well. So it's definitely some fantastic looking models. All right, so let's dive into, I think that's all the questions I personally have, without going to spoilers. Now, right now, as of today, I have not read this book, so I don't know what's in it. I know of a few things that the previous interview, we found out little nuggets and so forth. Is there anything, Clint, I'll throw this to you, is there anything about the book you are especially proud of that you can hint at?
Well, one thing we really worked on, and if it's a hit with the readers and the players, then I'm really proud of it. And if it's not, I guess I get the blame. We tried to do as much of the material as possible as in-universe documents or conversations. So you're seeing everything from the perspective of different peoples of Pannilore. So one section might be describing for instance, a Xirkaali city from the perspective of an Ophidian merchant.
Interesting. I guess here's a question then. Does that mean some of the content could be lies?
Some of the content could be outright falsehoods. The stuff that you can 100% trust are the stat blocks.
Yeah. The numbers you can trust. For someone who does the wiki, I don't like that. I like ambiguity. I kind of like factual stuff, and I think that's a little bit where I had a bit of trouble with the Champions book. How there was some bits of it that were written as letters and journal entries and so forth, and I don't like that it's not my thing. It's not my thing. So it's hard to translate that into it, because if things contradict, it's hard to work out what's truth and what's not, and especially when you want to try and introduce someone into a particular world or to a particular thing, ambiguity doesn't really work very well. But I understand why it's done that way. So if it works, it works. Obviously, I'm taking it from a case of I've just heard about the concept. If you see it, could be completely different. And I'm sure having your input, reading what you have, even outside of the Pannilore world, seeing some of your writings, you could do it very well. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes across.
Well, as said, as much as possible, but there are sort of dry text in between each section, where you're going to have the different perspectives. The dry text, trust also.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be one of those, it's hard to say because, in your brain right now, you're visualizing how it's written. I'm not. I'm just going based off what people are telling me. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And I can't wait to hopefully we can trick you on again and we can deep dive into certain aspects of the lore, because, I'm going to pick your brain about it to the best of my ability. So, well, what we'll do now, I think we've covered a lot of the non-spoiler things as best we can. There's a lot of other questions I have in my head, but I'm not going to go into them because we'll save that for the spoiler one. However, I did put it out there for a few questions from the audience. So these questions come from the Mantic Universe podcast Discord and also our Facebook page as well. I also put it out there to the main Mantic Discord to ask any questions, and I did get someone who sent me a direct message for a question as well. So we'll go through them. So the first one, it comes from Chris, from one of the hosts of the MUP Monthly. He actually asked, how do you pronounce Xirkaali? Now, I'm trying to pronounce it the same way the video does. I guess we'll have it from your mouth. Did you come up with the name Xirkaali, or was that something you were given?
No, Xirkaali was established quite a while before. I forget exactly which book they're first mentioned in, but it's been a while.
Yeah, I think the first book was one of the Armada books. I think it was Caesar Dread. Correct. Yeah, I think it was Caesar Dread, or it could be the other one, which something could borrow with it. It's got their little freaking goblin flying that thing. But yeah, so I guess you didn't come up with that. What about the race names? Did you have any influence on those?
Yes, that was pretty much all mine. The and the Venaras, which we didn't really get into.
It was mentioned. Venaras was mentioned only once in the lore doc that was posted on the Mantic page, and I didn't dive into that because all it is a brief mention in a line. So I don't actually know how much of an influence they have in the story. Is that going to be a race that's named that it's going to come up quite often, or
not too terribly often? They've sort of exist again, almost like a vassal state on the edges of the empire.
So it's kind of like, so there's a lot of nations to the east of the Xirkaali Empire that sounds like we might dive into at a future date. Is there actually, just because I like them, are there maps in the book?
Oh yes, there's quite a few maps.
There's quite a few, because I know that they've shown the world, or at least the known world map. which you can actually pre-order. And I really wish I could get my hands on that, but fortunately the budget's not there. But once I actually get my hands on a PDF of that map, you're definitely going to have that all over the wiki of seeing that. Did you have much influence in fleshing out that map, actually? Now we're on that topic.
Yeah, quite a bit. I was going back and forth with our cartographer, and he was even pointing out areas that he wanted to, had more questions about. Sort of the exact location for Chinlin, which is a sort of arcanely contaminated region of the Xirkaali Empire. Sort of deciding the extent of that, where to put the vassal states. Because in my original notes, they were kind of there, but not clearly defined.
And do you find that helpful, or you kind of like the ambiguity more?
No, I think it's helpful as well. Being a writer, sometimes it's like you can't see the forest through the trees. So you need that outside perspective going, hey, what about this? What about that?
Did you have any? Because we do know that during the Invasion 1 book, it was also written by Ben Stoddard. We had Mark Barber in there as well, and we had Scott Washburn. How much communication did you have? Much interaction with those authors as well, of kind of like maybe helping them integrate what you're doing with what they were doing?
We had quite a bit of interaction with each other. Sort of overseeing that there was almost like a consistent style and tone to the book, even though each faction is having a different author sort of attending to them. I think the biggest part where we had to sort of go back and forth was with the Edge halflings and dealing. They're going to be directly impacted by the invasion forces.
Yeah, a Stand Up Colour Spire kind of it sounds like it's going to go dive into that aspect of it. And also it's interesting going to see this halfling culture, because they were separated after the Winter's War. So there's a good, like, nearly, thousands, I think 1,000 or more than 1,000 years separating the halflings that we know currently than the EJ halflings, which are integrated with Elven society and probably have more of an interaction with magic as well, because the Shire ones, when they moved into the gastronomy kind of food magic kind of side of it, but these ones may have not gone in that direction. So it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of halflings we're going to get out of this. I'm excited. Halflings are my favorite faction. It's what got me into
I think you'll like them. I think you really like them.
Awesome. Yeah, that was when I was in the hospital, that's how I really got into the lore of Pannilore, is I read Broken Alliance, and I reached out to Scott and we had a really good chat, and that's how the wiki started. And I actually, how the wiki started is me looking up if gnomes exist in Pannilore, because halflings existed, and I was like, well, I do gnomes, and turns out they do exist, but they're small little gray things. So it was quite interesting. All right, we'll dive into the next question I have here, and that's from Claudio. He asks, is it more daunting or more exciting to get to do so many not so as established aspects of the lore and the world of Pannilore, like the early background stuff, like the Celestians and a whole new faction? So, I guess, having this ability to really set the tone and set the kind of structure of the past of Pannilore, how do you describe that challenge?
I'd say they're both almost like different disciplines, because when you're dealing with established lore, you've got to, at least I do, try to adhere as much as possible to what's already there, unless you see a way to do it better.
Yeah. I know the way.
When you're going off and creating something entirely new, it kind of takes off the shackles. You can go anywhere, do anything with it. So you can go into as much detail as possible, or you can leave little cracks and nooks for other writers to develop, which I tried to seed as much of that in there as possible. Especially with the Xirkaali, basically we created an entire new continent.
Yeah.
So you don't just have the Empire there, there's other things.
Mm. Was there a particular thing that you wish you could change? Not specifically with this particular Xirkaali edition, but just overall, what since you started from not Rise, since Edge of the Abyss to now, is there any aspect you kind of wish you tweaked? You can say no. It's all right.
I'm trying to think of one, but I can't.
No. All right. You got because I mean, I like to think every artist has always that one little thing like, oh, I wish I could slightly change that. But it's good to know that so far you're confident with everything that's put out there, and it's not caused you any drama.
No, I just thought of one. Getting Fall of the
What?
Celestians out before Clash of Kings 2024.
You mean the Rise of the Celestians?
No, Fall.
Oh, Fall. Oh, you actually wanted Fall to come out first.
The original plan, and I ran over, was to get that out last year.
I think it's a tricky one because it's so meaty. Like, there's so much you need to cover during that mirror smashing. And also the splitting of the Celestians is a big deal. I mean, you have to cover Karina's story. She didn't split. She used nature to stay as a Celestian. Then she absorbed two a Shining One and a Wicked One. You've got that's more. They could dabble more into the God War aspect of it, but there's so much you would need to cover during the fall of the Celestians, and according to the lore, things just went to hell across Pannilore when the mirror smashed. So it's a meaty thing. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it. I don't think anyone listening could have easily done it. All right, we'll dive into the next one. This is from Screaming a Dads. They ask, what do you see as the key difference or main selling point of Pannilore compared to other fantasy settings?
I would say one of the biggest things is a simple scope and variety of different factions you can play.
100%.
There is
agree with that.
Immense variety, and especially once you get into the sub factions of things.
I think that's the huge selling point.
Yeah. I mean, and just the fact that we've been discussing even more is
Sorry, keep going. Sorry, Clint. Sorry.
You mentioned something with an H, and they might be coming.
Something with an H.
I'll leave that dangling that way.
Interesting. Something with an H, everyone. Let's just theory craft that one. But yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, I think that's one of my main attractions to the Pannilore universe. It feels more of an open book as well, of adding more into it. I think one of the frustrations I had was, especially with the Warhammer universe and Warcraft universe and some other fantasy settings, it seems a little bit restrictive now to add in new factions or explore a lot more of the unknown. And I love the fact that we've got so many factions. The debate about too many factions, not enough factions, that is something that is ongoing. I think with this 4th edition, people are very nervous because there's a good chunk of the audience that doesn't want to lose factions. They want to keep it. And there's also others that want more new factions. And some people argue, well, it's too many factions to keep the rules in check. And some people argue, well, one of the main attractions to Kings of War to make it different is so many different factions and having that idea of building the army of your dreams. If you want hippie elves that live in the woods, you got the Sylvian King. But if you also want a more militaristic kind of faith-driven faction, you got the Basileans. And if you want dwarfs that are more kind of looser and less kind of dwarfish, you got the free dwarfs and more kind of still dwarfs in their own sense. So it's definitely a huge thing that I do hope they don't lose going forward, and that we're able to really show that all these factions can work, one on the table, but also from a narrative point of view. So I completely agree with what you've said there.
Well, and I think one of the things too is you can have factions that split off from other factions.
Yeah.
So they're still there, but they don't have to have the extensive model lineup to support them, because you're basically building off of a single range.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. I like subfactions. I think Free Dwarfs is maybe a good example of that. I do see Free Dwarfs being a little bit different, though. I see them as less militaristic, so sometimes the models don't always work with that. But I can see what's a good example? Probably the Kingdom of Men and Liga Oroidina could be one of those examples that you could see that as a subfaction. But yeah, I do hope they don't lose that. I think it's a very unique aspect of it, and to stand out in a very competitive market. If we put our business hats on for a second, it is a very competitive market with STLs, with so many indie developers able to put a lot more, sometimes a lot more funding, sometimes just a lot more time into, because I mean Mantic, they've got Halo, they've got Warpath, they've got Warpath Epic, they've got so many other things going. They can't put 100% of their resources into Kings of War. So it's just about being that unique element that stands out. So I really hope they keep that going. All right, we'll dive into our actually final, second to last question. We'll go Troy H. Sorry. He asks, when writing Rise of Celestians, how much of the plot arc was your idea, and how much came from Mantic? So I guess how much was you and how much was Mantic in terms of the big plot points in there, because he makes a point that it could have easily been broken down to 3 novels with just character development and flesh up. And I would agree. It's like it does jump around. If you haven't read Rise of Celestians, go read it. It's a really good establishing novel for Pannilore, but it does jump around on the timeline. It covers like 200, probably more than 200 years. Probably I think it's more like 500 years or something like that. But it jumps around, especially with the Oscan relationship he has with the other Celestians. I mean, how much came from you with that, or how much came from Mantic?
I think really the only established thing within that time frame was going to be the arrival of the Celestians. So most of the Rise of the Celestians, for good or for ill, came from me. There were a few things that were suggested. For example, we had the opportunity to explain Corgan's antipathy towards dragons. That was one aspect that got seeded in there. Fall of the Celestians, there's a lot more that was already defined that I had to work with.
And I think you fleshed out a lot of that as well, which hopefully we've fleshed out a lot of that in the fall. I guess just to add on to this, I mean, reading through Rise of Celestians, the thing that surprised me is that I always had the interpretation that before the Celestians, there were only 3 races: elves, humans, and dwarfs. However, we do discover there's ogres as well that existed before the Celestians, and now we know we've got the Doggos existed as well, and the snake Uranus race,
Uraeus.
However they're pronounced. Uraeus. That's I keep on butchering it every time you tell me. I always forget immediately. Were you given any direction to that aspect of it? Which races did exist before? Because obviously you didn't come up with the concept of the orcs were created by the Wicked Ones. So I mean, how much of that did you know about?
I actually had a mistake early on. I thought that the trolls were another one of Chiron's creations. They're actually a pre Wicked One race that already existed. So that was one aspect that kind of threw me for a loop. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's more of a case that it was never said, like salamanders as well. Because I mean, you do mention salamanders in the Rise. I think they helped out in one of the battles towards the end of the book.
There's some salamander mercenaries working for Ophidia.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, and they have a relationship with the Xirkaali as well. Ancient. We'll find out more about that when we dive into. That's why I've kind of stayed away from that, because I feel like that's a little bit of spoilers. Until after we read the book. So I guess, were you told which races existed not, or was it just more of a case you wrote it and then if you got told not to do it, you would have changed it?
Well, I mean, just reading the existing lore, you knew like a herd species. None of them existed before the God War. Orcs and goblins, also God War. And then all the various elven splinters were going to be coming far down the line. Obviously, Twilight Kin are directly related to the Pannilore Mirror.
Yeah.
And, Abyssal Dwarves, which you get a little bit of them in Fall of the Celestians.
Oh, good. Abyssal Dwarfs would be interesting to see there, because they directly come from Agathol, what's her name? Aragorn. Yeah, Aragorn. That's it. But that influence then the corruption that comes, and that's why like every Celestian, all the factions that we know have come from a Celestian or the hateful Celestians like the Varga. Ratkin didn't even exist at the time that we're talking about. So there's so many. And reforged orcs as well. That's another. There's so many different aspects of Pannilore. That's what's so exciting. I guess with also, while we're talking about the Twilight Kin, the Night Stalkers lore of where they come from, I get the interpretation they come from the void that the Celestians traveled through to get to Pannilore. Did you know much about the Night Stalkers or even the background of the Night Stalkers? Because it feels like you have added to that lore at the end of the Rise of Celestians of some of that Night Stalker, information, because it kind of sounds like the Celestians are at war with them or already know of them. How much do you know about the Night Stalkers?
Well, the Night Stalkers, I don't think you can ever know everything about them, and that's what makes them creepy. Because they do ultimately come from the void. And as you point out, traveling between worlds, the Celestians were crossing through the void.
Yeah. Do you see them more like chaos? Like, I know that way, like Warhammer have that chaos kind of aspect of it. Do you see them as really Pannillore's version of it, or do you see them very differently than that kind of thing?
My interpretation of them is almost like the Cthulhu mythos, where they're sort of these cosmic entities that are only dimly aware of our reality. So it's kind of one of these things they don't want to so much conquer anything as just simply obliterate it. It's not even about change. It's about sort of subverting, replacing it.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of questions come up because Night Stalkers are also in the Warpath universe as well, which is very similar to what Warhammer's done with Chaos. So I think that's going to be a very interesting faction to really dive into if we're ever able to really dive into that kind of faction lore. I don't know how, but God, that faction's always intrigued me, especially how it's in the Warpath universe now. Cool. All right. Well, let's dive into the last question that we have there. All right. So this is from Danny Graves, his novel Rage and Grace that comes out in February for those that are interested. And that's funny enough a Twilight Kin story, and there'll probably be some Night Stalker elements to it as well. They ask, which of the current Pannilore novels is your favorite? So I guess that's more of a broad question. How much of the novels have you read outside, obviously, your own, because you wrote them?
I haven't read nearly enough of them, to be honest. I really liked what Ben did with Pride of the King, which was sort of dealing early days of the dwarf sort of schism.
Yeah, the War of Stone.
Yeah, I thought that was what he did in there was really good for defining the dwarves and just the difference between free dwarves and imperial dwarves.
And just a good shout out, the sequel to that book comes out this month, October, November, and we actually hold an interview with him next week. So that I'll pass on that compliment. That was very kind of you.
No, I don't think it can be sort of trumpeted enough.
It's a good story, and
the dwarves in Pannilore should definitely read that one.
Yeah, free dwarfs and the dwarfs, and also it does set the scene of what's coming up. I have been given a little bit of an insight of what happens, and there's so much I want to talk about that book, of what's in there, and I think it's going to please a lot of long-term fans, definitely of long-term fans of Dwarfs and Pannilore, but also set a few firsts for Pannilore as well. And I can't wait to really talk about it. Yeah, it's a really, really good book anyway. But any other books you wanna shout out?
Well, I think Josh's new one, given that Invasion is coming up, is probably one everybody should be looking into picking up.
How was your relationship with Josh talking about the development? Because I mean, these two, the Invasion book was, and the Xirkaali culture was essentially being written at the same time. He probably was writing that book.
Yeah, Josh asked me for input on different aspects with portraying the Xirkaali, how they interact with the Yan, just overall, more or less cultural and psychological hot points with them. Again, because of the whole canine mentality, they're not quite where you would have humans.
Yeah, we're hoping to have an interview with them, so I'm really keen to deep dive into. It's hard to talk about a book without spoiling it, but really to deep dive into their thinking of, how do you write a story about a culture that you're not really getting too much control about. Was there actually anything he did that you incorporated, so the other way around?
There was one, and to my regret, I can't remember what the heck it was. I think it was the portrayal of the Xirkaali ambassadors, because they always come in teams. So you have a human and a Hemesian.
That is actually an aspect that I don't know whether you can tell us, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. I have been curious about what's the relationship between the Doggos and the humans, because the Doggos took over essentially the human empires and created the Xirkaali Empire. So is that relationship equal, or is it more of the Doggos seem to have more of a dominance?
Oh, it's definitely where the Doggos have the dominance. It's a caste system.
Okay.
So, but again, the Yan kind of don't see anything wrong with it because they were much worse off under their own kings.
Okay. I guess they don't have a problem with it until they do.
Humanity.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things is that sometimes and I think that happens a lot with human society in general, is that sometimes when we go for a very ugly period, we realize, and then we start to get out of it. World War II is a good example. Once we got out of World War II, we realized how bad things could be. So, we established UN, we had a good period of peace-ish there, and we realize how bad it was. But as time progresses, we forget about how bad it was, because all those people that experienced that time are no longer around to remind everyone. We just have the history books and all that, but we don't realize the emotion and how bad it was. And then over time, that resentment builds up, and then you start to get a bit of a pivot in the world and politics and so forth. So the Yan's probably in that kind of, we know how bad it was still kind of phase of that, and they haven't forgotten how bad it could be. But that's my interpretation anyway.
And another aspect to it too is that the Doggos have a very strict sense of honor and sort of responsibility, because they're still individuals, but they have more of the pack mindset. Is this good for the pack? And you can expand that to, is this good for the empire? Well, they see the Yan as part of the empire, so they're part of the pack, even if they're lower on the status rung. So they kind of,
once you're one of us,
they don't, abuse their authority capriciously. So if one of the Doggos is doing something wrong, he's going to be called out by the rest of his clan.
Which includes the Yan. It's feeling very Klingon-esque. Is that right to say?
Funny you mentioned that, because they were definitely also an influence. Sort of the whole idea of a martial society with a strict sense of honor where they police themselves.
Yeah, I love Klingon culture. I don't think it gets enough respect of, they're this warrior race, but the warriors to a point where they, the modern day Klingons, I don't know, we're not going to go into Star Trek stuff, but ultimately, I'm a huge fan of the Klingon, that honor aspect of it, and you can see that influence of in other writings as well. So it's interesting to see that influence, and that gives me a lot of hope, because it means there's rules, there's strict rules of code, and that sometimes is very interesting storytelling as well. Of some of the best Star Trek stories is sometimes the Klingons showing up. I remember DS9, how the Klingons show up to rescue the Federation after they get attacked, and it's just a sense of honor and pride, and despite them feuding and having a war with the Federation for so long, when they're friends, and they show up, and there's the honor there, and I love that kind of aspect of it. So it's interesting to see that bleed into it, and I'd love to see some stories, when it comes to the honor of the Xirkaali Empire. That's really cool. I like that. Well, moving right along, otherwise this interview will go on forever. Was the rise of Celestians as a similar? I can't say that, but you can read it. I can't say similaria. How do you say that?
Silmarillion is how I always pronounce it.
There we go. The Lord of the Rings kind of anthology there, vibe. The way it was written, or did you have? Was it always planned to do it in that kind of jumped kind of method, or was that something that you just settled into because it felt right?
No, it was always planned out that way, and much to my apologies to Tolkien, but the template I used was when I did the Black Plague trilogy for Warhammer, and there's similar time jumps, not to the extent, but there are time jumps to get to the major events during the sort of Skaven invasion of the Empire. So that was my main blueprint for that. And because it was planned out, I wanted to show sort of the development of the Celestians as almost these guides or instructors to the noble races, and especially the contrast between what they were doing in Elvenholm. They were almost sort of like consultants to the elves, and Primo Vantor, where they became more like mentors to the humans.
Interesting.
So you have an approach where with the elves, they were almost like equals, and with the humans, it's definitely a top-down kind of relationship.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yep. We can. Yep. That works. Yeah, that works. We'll move on to the next one, because this one I'm intrigued. Now, I'm not going to get you to name all of them, but the question is, if they made a movie and you had creative input, which actors would you choose to play the Celestians? So how about I'll give you two, because otherwise we could go through all the Celestians. We can name all of them if you want to do that, but I could give you an out and just give you two. We'll go with Ozkin and Chiron. Who would you get to play Ozkin or Chiron? And Chiron.
See, when writing the book, a lot of times I do picture people in the roles. But unfortunately, most of the people I could name are either dead or retired. So,
you can name them. It's fine. It's a safe option, though.
Well, I would think with Chiron, I was actually sort of imagining Yaphet Kotto. If you remember Yaphet Kotto, who sadly passed away a few years back. And Ozkin, I mean, you'd have to go with an earlier version of him than is currently working, but Charles Dance.
Oh, Charles Dance would be... I can't imagine him going full Father of Lies, though. I can see him, because I mean, obviously, Game of Thrones is the big one there, of that kind of... He's a very, controlled, kind of evil, kind of controlled, smart, bright character, but I don't know if I can see him going full evil. But that's a good choice. That's a very good choice. Oh, that would be cool. All right. Well, yeah. Sorry, my mind's going just thinking about Charles Dance now. All right. Anyway, we'll go to the final question. Are there any races or factions in Pannilore that you find especially interesting that you personally would like to write for in the future, or you could even tease the ones that you are writing that you can't tell us about? The one with the H.
No, I can't tease them. I would say one of the big things I'm looking forward to with the eventual God War is getting my claws into the orcs.
Oh yeah, that'd be
They
good.
have a really great psychology that could be explored. They're so in the moment kind of a thing. It's hard to pin them down as evil. What they do is evil.
Yeah, I do agree with that idea. I do think orcs, like I haven't really found too much favoring this idea, but I find orcs as a product rather than just a wicked one servant. Like the way I see it is they were created during the God War, then they were abandoned by their gods when the gods were shoved down into the abyss, and then after 3,800 years, all of a sudden this new breed of orc come out of the Riftforge orcs, being like the gods' new orcs, like the chosen ones, the ones that are favored more, and then the old orcs are kind of discarded and put to the side, while these Riftforge orcs kind of are now militaristic and hardened, and they seem to be more in favor than the old orcs. And I would love to see less of a crazy orc kind of savage raging through settlements, but more what would these orcs look like if they started to settle down? We saw a little bit of that in Claws of the Plain. They dive a little bit into orc culture and the hierarchy and so forth. But we're talking about 3,800 years. They could have spread anywhere in Pannilore. They could have established their own nation, a more controlled, settled nation, very akin to the Warcraft universe, how the orcs are a little bit more civilized, if you want to use that term. So that would be amazing for you to write a book in the modern era of orcs and how they're going, because they were taught how to procreate as well. And I always find that line very funny in the third edition. And there's a little line there that mentions how one of the wicked ones, and I can't remember which one, I think it was Talus, who taught the orcs how to procreate, which I always think that particular scene would be very hilarious to read. Like, how do you teach an orc how to procreate?
Well, I think they mentioned it in and this might be spoiler territory if they didn't, but I think they mentioned there are orcs in a pseudo vassal state condition on the edge of the Xirkaali Empire.
Oh, that would be interesting to explore.
And there's a really tricky way that the Xirkaali keep them in line.
Interesting. That's a nice little teaser. I think that's your best teaser of other than the race with an H or the faction with an H, whatever that's happening in the background. I think that's another teaser for the orc lovers, because there's a lot of orc fans out there just reading over the dialogue. Some people are a bit nervous about losing that orc faction. With the Riftforged orcs, a lot of people think the orcs are going to be merged into the Riftforged or the other way around. Either way, they're worried that something's going to happen there. But knowing that is definitely still a race and a faction that's going to be in the world and having its own unique flavor, I think will bring people a lot of reassurance. So interesting. All right, get on that, Mantic. We want an orc written novel by Clint. I think that would be a very fascinating one to get down. I guess that's the end of our questions there. So we'll start wrapping this up. Is there anything you want to say regarding how this experience has been for you when you're writing for this? Has this been very refreshing? Do you have, from a creative point of view, do you feel like you've been able to stretch your legs pretty well? How do you feel about this overall experience?
Well, going into Invasion, I don't think I was quite prepared for what I was getting into. It ended up being a lot more work than I expected. Usually I can do a novel in 3 or 4 months. Invasion sort of doubled that time frame. It's the main thing I've worked on all year. So I would say kind of I didn't quite understand what I was getting into. A lot of it self-inflicted. Once I decided, we should do as much of this as possible in universe. Well, that opened a whole new can of worms.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, is this the first full faction you've kind of built from the ground up?
Yeah, definitely. Because the Twilight Kin, while we added some new things, it was mostly expanding on their background.
Yeah.
The nameless one in between the two That was a lot of developing things whole scale as well. How much
Mm,
stays in the final product, I'm not positive when it eventually gets unleashed on players.
mm. That's another tease. There you go. There's other things cooking that we don't know. That's great. Well, I'm sure it's fantastic. I mean, reading your previous stuff, and knowing how much seems like how much love and care has been put into these books. It definitely does feel like a new phase, and having so many writers' influence, it's got to. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be good. I mean, that's really just saying it without reading it, and I'm really looking forward to getting my personal hands on it. And I'm hoping to hear more from you yourself, Clint. Seeing more of your stuff in Pannilore, and if there's any final, what actually, no, we'll wrap this up a little bit more delicately. So if you have any spoiler questions about this book, post it under this video below, or put it in our Discord or in Spotify. Put a little comment as well. I will gather some spoiler heavy questions over some time, and then reach out to Clint to see whether he's keen to pop on, and hopefully I have Mark here so I don't stumble through this as much as I have. But also put all your questions down below. We'll address everything. I really want to deep dive, have a really lore heavy pod with Clint to really get into, as they say, the meat and the potatoes of the lore that's going to be unleashed on us. And I guess I'll leave it with you, Clint. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with in terms of what's coming up?
All I can say is there are big plans for 4th edition, and you can look forward to a lot of releases in the next year.
Yeah, so we've got 6 ones, and the final one is death. So I've got a feeling all this is going to lead to that 6th book, which is death, which is obviously going to lead to a few deaths in the story. So it's going to be very, very interesting, and I can't wait. And it's been a pleasure to have you on, Clint. I hope this wasn't as painful as for you than it could have been. So I really appreciate you coming on.
No, thank you very much for having me on, Dave.
No worries. And thanks, everyone. And until next time, kia ora.